The beginning of the time. Sefer L'Kuti Amorim. This is a book which is a collection of sayings, and of course everybody knows that Alter Rebbe was being very humble when he calls it a likut. It's not a likut, it's kulei kedesh, it's kulei chidish, it's Teireh Shebeksav of Tanya Kadisha, and even the Chassidus which came before the Alter Rebbe, this is the Teireh Shebeksav of that also, just like the Chazal say that the Ovis Lamdu Teireh Kedim Shenitna. The Ovis learned and practiced Teireh mitzvah before Matan Teireh. Similarly, Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid had the Teireh before Matan Teireh. Tanya is the Teireh Shebeksav, not only of Chassidus Chabad, but of Chassidus Bechlal. Chelik Rishon. The Nikah B'Shem Sefer Shebenim is called the Book of Intermediates. The look at it is Svarim, it's looked from Svarim. Svarim says it goes on the Arizal and the Shalah. Seifman from writers goes on the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid and the Mendele Vitebsker and some say Ram Kalasker. K'dei Shiel Yirish Masa Yedin, the holy ones above their souls are in Gan Eden. And Miyusad, it's based on the pasuk. The whole Tanya is based on one pasuk. It's near to you, Yiddishkeit moed very much. Beficha, to control Yiddishkeit on the mouth level. Ubavavcha, to control Yiddishkeit on the thought and to some extent on the heart level. Lasoy said to control Yiddishkeit on the behavior level. On the chayra, it's very hard to do that. So the Vayda hated that the Rebbe is coming to explain well, Eichu Karev Miyeid, how it's very near, but that Acharuchu Ktsara in a long, short way, Be'eid Hashem Yisbarach with the help of the Eibush. Now the Pashat the Pshat that Acharuchu Ktsara is the Gemara. The Gemara says, I think it's a Masech Eruvin, that a person came to say Gemara Mefarashes. A guy came to a city and he asks a person which is the quickest road, this one or this one. He tells him this is long and short and this is short and long. So he goes down what he thinks is the shorter road, the short long road. He sees he's stuck very, very close to the city, but the road is full of rocks and thorns and water and snakes. So he goes back and he goes to the long short road. It's stuck a very, very long road, but it's saluf, it's always getrotten, it's a clear path. Chassidus Chabad is not a derech ktsara. Pelish Chassidus is derech ktsara. Chabad is like a derech arucha. It's a deep pnimisdik avodah to be a Chabad chassid, to learn and to be mizbeinin and to work on midas. But it's ktsara because its haslach is very great. A nocha pshat arucha ktsara is that there's two basic esbedim to this. The first one is Tanya Perek Aleph till Perek Yud Zayin, where the Alter Rebbe talks about being a Beinani through a long approach. Mayach Shalat Ala Leiv, mind rules over the heart. And from Yud Chas till Chav Hey, there's a different derech, which is a simpler derech for simpler people, which is called Ahava Misuteres. And this is a more makavdik avoid. So the Aruch Ktsara means a long approach to being a Beinani and a short approach. Now, we go to the Haskamas. We begin page 4. The Haskamas Rav Chosid, Hamafur, Semisha Liki Kadesh, Yamalei Merein, Rav Meshulam, Zusam Hanepola. The Zusha Hanepola is Leba Koyin. The Alter Rebbe used to say, I have two Yedidei Nefesh. I have two Yedidei Nefesh. Zusha Hanepola and Leba Koyin. And Alter Rebbe gave permission to print the Tanya. You do see, but Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya and he wasn't planning to publish it. And the Misnagdim deliberately forged it and they put Divrei Kfira in it. The Alter Rebbe says, strange and is strange that you put in Kfira in the Tanya. So Alter Rebbe saw it, so he gave permission to publish it. But before the Alter Rebbe published the Tanya, he rewrote the whole thing from beginning to end. And 26 years ago, the Rebbe published for Yitas Kislev, Toshin Mamalef, the Madura Kama of Tanya, the Ksavya, the Tanya which was never meant to be printed. You can see Mamash on every line, it's the same Sefer. But the Shinuyim Rabim, and every line came out, Alter Rebbe made Shinuyim when he rewrote the Tanya for print. But he said that he wouldn't print the Tanya unless he had the Haskama of his two friends. They both lived in the same city in Hanepola. So a shliach was sent to Hanepola, and they got the Haskamas within right away, the same day or around the same day Take Tuesday, Pashas Kisov Taf Kuf Nun Vav. There's a sipa with Alter Rebbe got up a Haskama from a Tzadik Nister, from a man named Carl, who was a janitor in a theater in Leipzig, but that's another story. And these two people gave the Haskama on the Tanya, then it went to print, and the Hemshech HaSipur is the Alter Rebbe said he wants, they should be ready to be learned for Yitas Kislev, which is knappa 3 months. And it was ready Chav Kislev. When the Alter Rebbe heard that it was ready one day late, he sighed and he said, Chav Kislev, Chav Kislev, Chav Kislev. Rabbis Machshavet B'lev Ish Vatzachad Hashem Yisakum. The Eibush one. And the Pale, this Chassidim say, the Alter Rebbe spent 3 more hours by the Mesnagid's house, the night of Chav Kislev. And the Alter Rebbe said that these 3 hours were worse than the whole 53 days in jail. But as a result, we now have 2 days Yom Tov, Yutas Kislev and Chav Kislev. And okay, this is the Haskama of Rav Dusha Hanepola. The Rebbe in the Ha'aras explains B'diuk how each one, the Rishon says Piruseinu and he says Shas Tiknu. There's made in the Kediyukim and the Chilukim of the Haskamas. One short Hagdama, that is B'chlal Haskama in those days, not like now. Today Haskama is a Hesped B'chayim. That's what it is. It's a living eulogy. Haskama in those days was mostly because of Hasagas Gvul. People used to reprint Svarim. And printing a Sefer and typesetting a Sefer was enormously expensive. and people would go and reprint it, and the original printer would lose his mamish's chayas. So there were takonis, but what we call today the laws of copyright. And the idea was that if you printed a sefer, for 5 years nobody could copy your sefer. If you reprinted the sefer, the 5 years started over again. In other words, as long as you printed new dfusim, the 5 years started again and again and again. In other words, if every 4.5 years you printed a sefer, theoretically it's yours forever. But if 5 years pass and you don't republish a sefer, you lose your copyright. Sometimes it was 10 years, but standard was 5. The Tanya, there were 2 Chassidim who made an effort to print the Tanya. One of them was the Alter Rebbe's son-in-law, of Shalom Shachner Reb Nech, the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek's father. He was no longer the Alter Rebbe's son-in-law because the Rebbe Shnevelei had already passed away, and he remarried. And Shalom Shachner remarried. He had other children. But he was a big chassid of the Malton Rebbe's. His father was of Neach, who was a Talmud by the Mendel Levitrit, and another chassid, and they were afraid of losing their investment because someone's going to go and make offset from their work. So this is the primary reason, this is the pashastic reason for Haskamas. But the while you see what the Alter Rebbe's friends thought of him. Haskamas Rabbi Chassid Meforsim Mishaliki Kaddish Yamalei, the chassid who's famous, who's a godly man, who's called holy man of Shulam Zushim Mahanapo. Hine, Bereis is Eksav Mishal Haraf. I see the writings of the Raf. The Alter Rebbe was called Stam Raf. Now the Maggid told him to write the Shulchan Aruch, so in Paltiel he's called the Raf. Hi, God, this genius, Ishalikim Kaddish, a man of God who was holy, v'toyer and pure. Aspaklaria hameira. He's a glass to which the Torah shines in a revealed way, in a lichtika way. V'teiv asheras, and it's good that he did, even though he didn't want to print it. It's good that he decided to print it. V'shehifli ad Hashem chaste, Hashem did the great, showed wondrous kindness. V'nasan believe Torah and put into his pure heart. Lasses is called to do all this, and to print, to write, and to publish the Tanya. Lahares amad Hashem d'rachav ha'kedeshim, to show the nation of God the Eibishter's ways. Or the Torah, his will was shalei lahalas, is a ksav mehem lebeis, was not to print his ksav. Machma shein daki bekach, it's not his derech. In other words, he's humble. Like machmas is pashat hakadreisa mehem bekerem kol Yisrael. This pamphlets were disseminated amongst the Jewish people, and you see the Tanya, the first time it came out in kuntresim. One kuntis was 1 paydik, another kuntis was 2 prakim, another kuntis was 3 prakim, and people used to collect kuntresim. You had 1 kuntis, and everybody had different pieces of Tanya. They would copy from one another. The misnagdim sold very cheap a whole kuntris, a whole Tanya, with deliberate ziyufim. Midei sefer meshunim, through writers that are strange. The word meshunim is precise. Or machzibas atokis, because of the various copies, sheines, various rabot sefer b'me'edes, many mistakes. V'huchrach lahavi okenteisim ha'im lebeis atvus, and decided to publish them. V'heir ad Hashem es ruach hashutfim, and the Eibishter inspired the heart of the partners, harehu haraboni, hamuflik, havoslik, marinu rab shalom shachner, marinu rab nech. This is the Tzemach Tzedek's father. V'herehu haraboni, hamuflik, havoslik, marinu rab mordechai, marinu rab shmuel alevi. To publish these pamphlets in the printing shop in Slavita. And since they're doing a good deed, I say thank you. They're worried from around from printers, publishers, there are many that they do damage. And to hurt those who are fortunate to have the schus and the vision to write the printer sefer. Therefore, Gamanu will resolve Litan Haskam to give approval and a power. Nobody can lift up his hand in his foot to affect, to cause to these publishers. Shum has a chas v'shalom, no damage, God forbid, Basagas Gavul in taking over their ground. Shum meif. V'asal Shum Adam, there's not permitted to any person Litva Sefer Anal to print this sefer, built the idea of Matfisa Manal, there's permission of these printers. Ad Meshech Chomesh Shanim Retufim, till the end of 5 contiguous years, Meyem de Lamata, from the day that follows. Like I told you before, if they would reprint it, the 5 years would start over. That was standard. Whoever listens to my words, will get a blessing of goodness. Any case of the Vari, I'm writing my words. I'm demanding this for the cover of the Teda. It's Tuesday, which is written twice Kitev, Pashas Tove, Shnas Piduseinu Plat Cotton, which is of course Tav Kuf and Vav, which will be 1796. HaKotten Mishum Zuzah Mahanabon. Now, remember, this was printed in Slavita. They were alive when they were called Chosid Meforsim Mishalakim Kadesh Yamalei. The bishop was alive. He read the titles that they wrote about him. He calls himself HaKotten. And this is what they write about it. And you want to know something very interesting about the Tanya. In the first print of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe's name Bechlal does not appear. Notice that they didn't say the Alter Rebbe's name. Nor is the Rebbe Leib HaKoyen the Alter Rebbe's name. The first print of Tanya didn't have hours, the first print of Tanya was from Sefer until Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, And that was it. The Alter Rebbe's name, Bechlal, does not appear klal in the Tanya. The Anivas of the Alter Rebbe. But their names appear with Mufursim, Ishalakim Kodesh Yomel. You should know that Tzemach Tzedek used to write that the Lubavitcher Rebbeim, as principle, did not give Haskomas. But Leiba Koyens, Einiklach printed his Sefer. I forgot what it's called. He printed Eragonus. And the Tzemach Tzedek wrote a Haskoma. He said, even though it's not our derech, but he wrote a Sefer, Haskoma for my Zayda Sefer, so I must write a Haskoma for your Zayda Sefer. Chochmas Adam Toip Ne'aretz. The wisdom of a man has filled the face of the earth, has radiated the face of the earth. See the holy writings of the compiler, the author, the God. Ishalikim Kodesh V'Tahir, a holy man, holy and pure. Chasid V'Onav, who is Lefnim Mishurzdin and humble. Hashem Ekvar Niglim is thought of the secrets of this person already revealed. Yesha B'Shabbat Chakmunim, who is still sitting in this place of wisdom. Next to our Rebbe, our master, the genius of all the world, which of course goes on the Mezitcher Magid. And he drew life from the fountain of the spring of living water from the Magid. And now Yisrael, what goes on the Baal Shem Tov, the Rebbe of their Rebbe, will also rejoice when they will be revealed the words of the holy words of this, the published, this author. The base at first to bring to print, teach the nation of God holy paths. Anyone will see in the inner workings of his writings. And this is such a famous Godel, there's no need to bring a proof. You have any more Tanyas for these two young alike? Oh, can you give them Tanyas? It doesn't even have to, everybody knows the greatness of the Alter Rebbe, everybody knows the greatness of the Magid and the Baal Shem Tov. Now, but then, so why am I giving a Haskama? I'm afraid of a damage. That it wouldn't cause a damage to the publisher, to the printers. I'm giving a power and a warning. No one should lift up their hand and their foot to print this Sefer till the end of 5 years from today, from the date written below. One listens to these words, will have a blessing of goodness. I'm writing my words. Who's saying this like in the honor of the Torah. Yem Gimel. Today is Tuesday. Parshas Tavi. Tav Kuf Nun Vav. Tiknu lePratkot Nidul Ipkein. Now, Haskamas Rabbanim Shich Nebiagora Machaba Zal Nishmas Yeit. This is the Haskama of the Alter Rebbe's children. This Haskama was not written at the same time as the first. The first two Haskamas were written when the Tanya was printed the first time. Mishnas Tav Kuf Nun Zayin, 1796 to 97. The Mittel Rebbe and the Moshe and the Chaim Avraham, the Alter Rebbe's three sons, the year after the Alter Rebbe passed away, Tov Kuf Ayin Dalet, which was 17 years later, or whatever it was, printed the Tanya over, and they added the Igeres HaKedesh and the Kunter Sachar. The Igeres HaTshuva also was not printed. The first Tanya only had two Chalakim, the Kuti Amara, Mashara, Yichaz Ve'emunah. Then later on, Tov Kuf Samach Vav, they added the Igeres HaTshuva. But the Igeres HaTshuva already appeared in the Tanya B'Chayaf in Alter Rebbe. The first time they printed the Igeres HaTshuva, they printed the Madura Kama of the Igeres HaTshuva. What I said to you before, Madura Kama. But the Igeres HaTshuva was added to the Tanya B'Chayaf in Alter Rebbe. But the Igeres HaKedesh, Yekutas Achrin, was printed after Alter Rebbe's Histalkus. In the middle there was a huge war with Yiddish Tzaras. So the Ksavim were not so precise. In other words, they didn't have a lot of originals. They were printed from copies. And the Middle Rebbe and his brothers are explaining first of all why they published it. They reprinted the Tanya with the Igeres HaKedesh, Yekutas Achrin, to complete the 5 Sfarim, Bereishis, Neach, Vayikra, Bereishis, Shmeis, Vayikra, Midvarim. The Rebbe says 5 Chalakim to the Tanya by adding the Igeres HaKedesh and the Kunter Sachar. So it's also the same idea. Haskamas Rabbanim Shich Ne'gona Machab Zachenu LeBrachon Nishmas Yid. Hayay since Shehoskam Etzleinu, we made the decision Litan Reshus V'Haman to grant permission and rights Lahal Eis Al Nichbash Atfus, to bring onto the press the permanence of print. L'Zicharon Libnei Yisrael, for the good memories of the Jewish people. Ksei Divrei Yesha V'Yemes, the written words that are fair and true. Divrei Elokim Chaim, the words of the living God, Shel Adonenu, Avinu, Moirenu, V'Rabbeinu, Zechenu Levrach, of the Alter Rebbe, our father. The Raksuv M'Ksav Yodei HaKdesha, which he wrote with his own holy hand, Ba'atzmei, by himself, U'Lasheni HaKadosh, in his holy language, Shekol Dvarav, T'Gach Le'esh Beires, his words were like fiery coals that are burning, that Yalhiv all of us, that inflame the hearts, Le'karvan Lavim Shebashamayim, to being close to the Eibush. The Alter Rebbe did not write his own Chasidus. Alter Rebbe's Chasidus was written by his two sons, the Mittler Rebbe and the Moshe, by his brother Rebbe Delay, by his grandson the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek, and by the Chassid the Pinchas Reises. There were 5 Manichim in Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe did not write. He wrote very little. This is not what Hasidim wrote, but Alter Rebbe himself wrote in Igeres HaKedesh, in letters, and also the essays that he prepared while he was working on the Tanya, called the Kuntres Acher. So this is the Alter Rebbe's Lashon. The Rebbe used to say always by Fabrengen. The Alter Rebbe's Lashon is called L'Shene HaZohar von Alten Rebbe, the gold language of the Alter Rebbe. Alter Rebbe's words are very bediuk. Ahidit mi gesagt that the Baditchever writes, but the Alter Rebbe is L'Shene Hu Lashon HaAlfis Mamish. That the Alter Rebbe's Lashon, the Lashon of the Rif. Very, very precise Lashon. He meant in Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. But the Alter Rebbe was his use of words was extremely, extremely exact and precise. So this is not Stam Chassidus and Alter Rebbe, this is what Alter Rebbe himself wrote. And Alter Rebbe didn't write very much. B'Shem Igeres HaKedesh Nikru. And we're calling it Igeres HaKedesh, the holy letters. Because Cherubim, the vast majority, how you were Igeres Shilach, letters which he sent. Me'ez Kfei Kedosh from our Holy Father. La'ed is Hamad Hashem, to show the nation of God the pathway in which they should walk, v'amaisa sheyasna, the deeds that they should do. Umachmas, and since Shabakama came within various places, Hitivlei Tiyunim, he provides support. B'Sefer L'Kutei Amarim Shalei, from the Sefer L'Kutei. In other words, in the Igeres HaKedesh, he makes reference to the original Tanya. Tera is written in one place it's Bekitzer, in another place it's Ba'arichas. Some places, maybe in the Tanya it's brief, and in the Igeres HaKedesh it's long, or in the Igeres HaKedesh it's brief, and in the Tanya it's long. And especially in addition to the fact that the ideas of the Tanya are explained better in the Igeres HaKedesh, and there are ideas which are machlal not in the Igeres HaKedesh, in the Tanya, but the Chidushim, if you remember what we learned, the Igeres HaKedesh pulpulim in Kabbalah, which the Alter Rebbe made for himself as he was writing the Tanya, and these pulpulim don't appear in the Tanya itself. Bekuntris acher and al-eze prakim, an afterthought which he wrote on certain prakim, and it seems mostly that's in Tanya Perek Mem. Asher Kosa, what he wrote, Beis Chibri HaSefer L'Kutei Amarim, while he was preparing the Tanya, which took him 20 years to do Kiyadua. Pilpul the Iyun Omek, it's a discourse and a deep delving al Mamarizeya, Veitzchaim, or Priyetchaim, and Kabbalah, and Zeyer, and Eitzchaim, and Priyetchaim, Shenirim Keseisim Zazed, that it seems like there's contradictions. Uberuach Mivinasi, in the spirit of his understanding, Miyashrom, he resolves these problems. Kol Dibar Alefan, of each word as it should be. Shekosta B'Kutei Amarim, as he wrote in the Tanya. In other words, sometimes the Tanya seems to go into subjects where there's contradictions in Kabbalah. So he resolves the contradictions in Kabbalah and explains exactly what he means in the Tanya. So therefore, because the Igeres HaKedesh inspires people, and first of all is Divatei Ranim b'Makamachat Nashirim b'Makamachat. Second of all, there's Mamish Naya Zachin in this Kuntes Achim, which is not in the Tanya, and therefore, Roy Reinu, we decided Roy V'Nochen, it's fit and appropriate L'Chabram to combine them Im Sefer L'Kutei Amarim with the Tanya, which includes two Chalakim, the Sefer Shabbeinu and the Sherechet Emunah, V'Igeres HaTshuva, which is the third Chelek about Tshuva. And now comes the Haskam. It was different. We come to put a great fence. A of a curse. The last layas which cannot be cured. No one should raise their hand to print in the same way. Or even one without the other. From 5 years from the day written below. In other words, this is also a haskama that people shouldn't reprint it. Like I said to you before, as long as you print it within 5 years, the 5 years starts over again. But however, I must announce, must tell you, because of the war with Napoleon and all the tzaras, the original manuscripts of Alter Rebbe were destroyed and lost. Asher hayu bedikte godel, which were very exact. Like I told you, the Rebbe say l'sheni hazahav von Alten Rebbe. Lechasav al yesei sachav, without an extra word or missing a letter, and therefore v'lenisha kiyim zeh ha'ma'at meharbe. This is the only thing that remains from all that Alter Rebbe wrote. Asher nilketu echad la'echad, which were collected one by one. Mehatokes, from copies, not from originals. Hamefuzanim eitz talmidim, which were spread around amongst his talmidim and his chassidim. And therefore, even though Taki the Kavanah was Ritzuya, but if you're going to find a mistake, who could be past making mistakes? Everybody makes mistakes. You will see that the mistake is obvious because it's mitah sefer, because it's not Chas Hashem that the Alter Rebbe made a mistake, but the copyist made a mistake, and v'hakavona tiyabru, the intent will be clear. But if there's a mistake, it'll be an obvious mistake, and not Chas Hashem, you don't understand the Alter Rebbe, or the Alter Rebbe made a mistake, it's pushed the copyist made a mistake, and the mistake is obvious. They've been ba'adeni avi mereni v'rabbeinu hagon ha'chosed kodesh yisrael moran v'rabbanu shnei zalman zechlinu levracha the shmasa begins in b'reimim Chaim Avraham ben Adeni avi mereni v'rabbeinu hagon ha'chosed v'rabbanu shnei zalman zechlinu tzadik levracha. Nishmas begins in Meremim. When Meisha ben Adeni Avi Merenu Rabbeinu Hagon HaChosesh Niyazam Medechen Levracha Nishmas begins in Meremim. The Rebbe has a Sicha. I remember the Rebbe saying this Sicha, where each one writes different titles. The Middle Rebbe writes about the Alter Rebbe Kodesh Yisrael, and his brothers did not write Kodesh Yisrael. And the Rebbe says very poshut because the Middle Rebbe himself was a Rebbe, Kodesh Yisrael. So he's referring to the Alter Rebbe in his own Madregim. So the Middle Rebbe writes Kodesh Yisrael because he was Taka Kodesh Yisrael, and his brothers were not. The Reb Chaim Avraham adds the words. He says, "Gona Chosid Maron V'Rabbana." I forgot what the Rebbe said about Maron V'Rabbana, but I know that by Reb Moshe he said that Moshe was known to be a big goel. That's why he writes Hagon HaChosid. And one other diktuk that the Middle Rebbe writes Zal, the Moshe writes Zal, and Reb Chaim Avraham writes Zatzal. So the Rebbe, because Reb Chaim Avraham was known to be a Porush and a big tzaddik, and that's why he's medayik to write Zatzal. The Rebbe learns ganze bilyonim from the Shinuyim and the way they refer to the Alter Rebbe in this Haskam. Shine.